I read this book in a law school class related to critical race theory, something that is regularly touted these days out of context. And critical race theory is the understanding of race as it is associated with the law, how race has shifted over time. And Derek Bell is was a brilliant critical race theory legal professor.
And the guilt that I'm talking about here is white guilt, because it seems like that is what Jon Stewart has, okay? It seems to me that there's a certain class of people out there that happen to be white liberal elitists that are desperate to prove that, hey, I'm the good white guy, right? I'm an ally to the so-called people of color. And this is why you get a lot of these late night comedians, again, who happen to be white, obsessed with Trump, right? Going after Trump because that's their way of virtue signaling, hey, I'm not racist. Look, I'm going after the racist orange man here. Hey, can I get some applause, right? Can I get some acceptance, some love, And that's why a lot of them are also obsessed with trying to be woke, trying to appear as woke as possible, right? They come out here and they support the far left social justice agenda. Movements like Black Lives Matter that are clearly a farce, that is based on a false premise, okay, based off a lie. They support it anyways, even though they know it's a scam, because at the end of the day, that is their way of relieving their guilt, right? Emptying their consciousness, because they're constantly reminded from the people on the left how bad white people have been to everybody else in this country. Okay, so that being said, Jon Stewart seems to be a victim of this. Okay, he seems to actually be an extreme example of this, as again, the guy is trying to return back to relevance, and he has this new show on Apple TV called The Problem with Jon Stewart. And one of the first ever segments that I've seen from this guy's show is him basically expressing the problem with white people. Take a look.
And thus, the problem with white people. Hold on. I'm just gonna stop for a second and pose so you can get your memes out. Okay, there we go. Get a good picture for your clickbaits. For however sincerely we want to reckon and listen, the truth is, America has always prioritized white comfort over black survival. Black people have had to fight so hard for equality that they've been irreparably set back in the pursuit of equity. And any real attempt to repair a ton of that damage, reparation, sets off white people's "they're coming for our shit" alarm, which we would know ourselves had we actually been listening.
My feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem, and they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out of it.
Yeah, so Jon Stewart, that segment right there, gives you guys an idea of how far gone this guy is and the audience of people that he's trying to appeal to here, okay? And in that segment there, he makes the strange argument that it seems that there's an irreparable problem, right? A problem that can't be fixed. That's what Jon Stewart says. And that anytime you try to fix this problem that Jon Stewart says can't be fixed, white people get mad about it. In which I would basically ask, okay, well, what's the point of fixing a problem that you said can't be fixed, right? But anyways, that's not the segment that I want to talk about here from Jon Stewart. That just kind of gives you an idea of kind of where this is going.
The wealth gap, worse now. Home ownership, worse now. Segregation, worse now. On average, a white high school graduate is wealthier than a black college graduate. Forget about them telling you even the stark facts don't seem to matter.
Although differences in choices and performances are ignored or dismissed in politically correct quarters, such differences obviously affect differences in outcomes. And you then, in the Thomas Sowell Reader, compare the different economic records. This is fascinating, but I mean, there's a lot fascinating in here, but this struck me especially. You'd compare the difference in economic performance not between whites and blacks in this country, but between whites and whites in Europe.
Yes.
Tell us about the difference between Danes and Greeks.
Oh, well, if you look at Eastern Europe and Western Europe, the economic differences between Eastern Europeans and Western Europeans is greater than that between blacks and whites in America. And people ask, why is there such a gap here? Why is there such a gap there? I say, well, ever since the Civil Rights Act, why hasn't that gap closed completely? I say, look at Eastern and Western Europe. They've been on the same Europeans. They've been on the same continent for centuries, and the gap hasn't closed. So, gaps don't close that fast.
So we need to the underlying message here is be realistic about what actually causes growth. Be realistic about the durability of culture, even of economic culture,
Yes.
work habits. And,
Oh, yes.
All right.
The problem with white people, for however sincerely we want to reckon and listen, the truth is America has always prioritized white comfort over black survival. Black people have had to fight so hard for equality that they've been irreparably set back in the pursuit of equity. And any real attempt to repair a ton of that damage, reparation.
It's amazing. Whenever you look for facts, when you do research, or either about people or about nature, you find skewed distributions everywhere. But when you listen to people talk, especially in the academic world, the underlying assumption is that the people are all have the same capability, and that therefore any differences in their outcomes must be to other people in some way doing them wrong. It's amazing because if you think just of an individual, I mean, the same man does not have the same capability. He's not even equal to himself at different stages of life, much less being equal to all the other people at all their highly varying stages of their lives.
When a black person or group makes a statement or takes an action that the white community or vocal components thereof deem outrageous, the latter will actively recruit blacks willing to refute the statement or condemn the action. We've seen them just the other day. Blacks who respond to the call for condemnation will receive superstanding status. Those blacks who refuse to be recruited will be interpreted as endorsing the statements in action and may suffer political or economic reprisals.
Virtue signal his white guilt and go down the woke rabbit hole. Except in this segment, it seems like Jon Stewart is going so far down the woke rabbit hole that even Cory Booker is like, nah, I don't necessarily really know about this. I'm not sure if I agree with you on this. Take a look.
Ways. And so he came in, I said, hey, look, we got a crisis. Very few black farmers are existing. Do something about it. He did something about it. It was my legislation.
And my point is, what happened to that legislation?
It got stopped.
That's my point.
Because we have a Supreme Court and that we knew
it got stopped because
of legal
white
challenges.
Resentment. Yes. White farmers felt like resources were being taken away from them and given to people
because
who
people, not again. When you say white farmers, if I'm a white farmer listening to this in Iowa, I'm thinking to myself, Jon Stewart's calling me. Jon Stewart is blaming me for stopping Booker's legislation. That's not true. But some people stopped that legislation.
Right.
And my job, who wants to help black farmers who've been built off of their land, is to go back to work with the Biden administration, write new legislation that could withstand a legal challenge.
Yeah. So if you watch a conversation involving Cory Booker and somebody else, and Cory Booker is the one that sounds sane, right, and rational in the conversation, you know that the person that Cory Booker is having that conversation with is absolutely off their rockers, that they are insane, okay? That they are way too far left. They are way too woke. Because I'm going to tell you guys, Cory Booker is woke, okay? He is very, very, very woke. I'm just going to remind you guys of kind of how woke this guy is. Take a look.
As Langston Hughes wrote, "Oh, let America be America again." the land that never has been yet, but yet must be the land where everyone is free. Oh, yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, but I swear this oath, America will be. That is the story of how you got to this desk, you and I and everyone here, generations of folk who came here and said, America, I'm Irish. You may say, no, Irish or dogs need to fly, but I'm going to show this country that I can be free here. I can make this country love me as much as I love it. Chinese Americans first forced into near slave labor, building our railroads, connecting our country, saw the ugliest of America, but they were going to build their home here and say, America, you may not love me yet, but I'm going to make this nation live up to its promise and hope. LGBTQ Americans, from Stonewall women to Seneca, hidden figures who didn't even get their play until some Hollywood movie finally talked about them and how they were critical for us defying gravity. All of these people loved America. And so you faced insults here that were shocking to me. Well, actually not shocking. But you are here because of that kind of love. And nobody's taken this away from me. So you got 5 more folk to go through. 5 more of us. And then you can sit back and let us have all the debates. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a well-charted Senate floor because it's not going to stop. They're going to accuse you of this and that. Heck, in honor of your person who shares your birthday, you might be called a communist. But don't worry, my sister. Don't worry. God has got you. And how do I know that? Because you're here. And I know what it's taken for you to sit in that seat.
Yeah. So when you are outwoking that guy, right, I think you're going a little bit too far, right? When that guy is calling you out saying, hey, you're going a little bit too far with this race stuff, when he clearly has no issues, going on about race this and race that, I think there's an issue here.
Blacks who respond to the call for condemnation will receive superstanding status. Those blacks who refuse to be recruited will be interpreted as endorsing the statements in action and may suffer political or economic reprisals.
When you think of how many factors there are at work, it's incredible to think that they're going to work out the same for almost any group defined any way.
Got it.
The other thing, it's so frustrating. I can come up with umpteen different examples of this disparities in various situations, including situations where it is not possible for it to be either discrimination or genetics. People on the other side cannot give you one example. You can read reams of paper by advocates of social justice and not find one example anywhere in the world. There are people who've done international studies. Braudel, I quote, the French historian. He said, in no society has all parts of the population had the same outcomes.
I'm sorry to say, I think just white people talking about this endlessly is not going to help actual Black Americans who would deal with it. I have certain ideas about that. I think we need to focus intensely on young education.
One of the classic examples to me of few things that are going very well in the ghettos across the country, and that's some of the charter schools that have come in where the public schools, the kids are just wiped out. I mean, the kids in those ghetto schools often are 2 or 3 years behind the national norms and all kinds of stuff. But in some of these ghetto schools, especially those run by the KIPP organization or by the Success
These charter
Academy,
schools.
Right. Charter schools in the ghetto.
Right.
Their kids are scoring at levels equal to, and in some cases better than, that in affluent suburbs where the kids come from families making $200,000 a year. And you would think, my God, this is something that ought to get a lot of attention. The welfare state supporters are fighting against charter schools. The NAACP is fighting against charter schools. The teachers' unions give a lot of money to politicians. They give money to the NAACP. I think it's the most cynical thing you can find in American politics are those people who are making themselves big champions of blacks, and yet who are fighting against it. The one school, kind of schools that are offering a way out of poverty for millions of black kids.
I think education is crucial. I think figuring out a way to help black kids have a stable family. The truth is,
yes,
if you have a two-parent married home, you're going to say something to you, Andrew. You really are. The data is that 30% of African Americans don't have this. It's the biggest factor in getting people into college and succeeding in life. And if you ignore it, we're going to let these black kids down.
I feel like your defensiveness and the tropes that you use about the black family being the cause of entrenched poverty in that community ignores why those families are broken up in the first place, and that's mass incarceration, and that's the way that we viewed the crack epidemic.
As of 1960, I just find this one heartbreaking. As of 1960, 2/3 of all black American children were living with both parents. That declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1995. Among black families in poverty, 85% of the children had no father present.
It's the legacy of the welfare state.
And by the way, we see illegitimacy rates rising among everybody.
Yeah, and in other countries.
And
you know, the very same thing in England.
Right, and Cory Booker in this situation is right, because I think the substance of what they're talking about here, I don't know the exact legislation. I couldn't really find exactly what Cory Booker was talking about or what they're talking about, but I think what they're talking about is a provision in the COVID stimulus package that basically has debt relief targeted just to so-called minority farmers. There's debt relief specifically for just them, okay, allocated towards just them. And there was a group or multiple groups that sued on behalf of other farmers who felt like they were being discriminated against because basically the federal government is forgiving debt, right, or handing out resources based off race. They're openly discriminating against people based off of race. Now, some federal judges had put this program to a halt, basically saying, look, I mean, this is not really constitutional. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I'm going to be real. I mean, they're right. That's just what it is. You can't just openly discriminate against people based off race. It is what it is. Okay, and that is kind of what Cory Booker is kind of getting at here, right? In this conversation when he's just like, okay, well, listen, we have to construct legislation that's actually going to be constitutional. And I believe Cory Booker and some other senators actually had new legislation that they think might actually be constitutional that's going to help out black farmers. But see, Jon Stewart, on the other hand, he doesn't really want to have that nuanced conversation about how it's wrong to discriminate against people based off race. Okay, even if you're doing it to try to right the wrongs of the past, it's still discrimination, right? So instead, he goes with it's white resentment, right? It's white resentment. It's just white farmers who feel bad that blacks are getting something that they're not getting, right? And even Cory Booker is like, nah, that's not it. What you're basically saying here is that, you know, some random white farmer in Iowa, you're saying that you're blaming him as the reason why these black farmers didn't get debt relief. Okay, you're saying that he's the reason why Cory Booker's legislation is being stalled, and that's not necessarily true. Okay, and Cory Booker had to correct Jon Stewart on that and let Jon Stewart know, hey man, you got to be careful about how you characterize a whole group of people. Okay, you got to be real careful about that. And that's something that, you know, Democrats, in my opinion, they've seemed to have forgotten because they want to appeal to such a loud but small group of people who forever want to be worshipped, right? And that are going to always remind them of how guilty they think white people are for the wrongs they've done in the past. They're so caught up in appealing to those people that they forget that they're alienating and offending a vast majority of this country in the process, right? I'm like, yo, when Cory Booker is telling you to chill out with the wokeness, you know you're going too far. You know you're going too far, okay? I mean, you can have a nuanced conversation for why that legislation stalled, other than, well, it's just white resentment. It's just white people feeling bad about, you know, black people getting something they're not getting, right? I think the conversation is deeper than that because, again, you do have discrimination based off race. That is legitimately a constitutional issue. And in my opinion, there's a way to help out black farmers and so-called minority farmers who may or may not have been disadvantaged in the past outside of where we're just going to give money to them and forgive their debt just based off race. There's other ways to do it that are fair and that embody equality, okay? Not equity, but equality, which is what we should be striving for, okay? But again, you know, hey, Jon Stewart, he's more concerned about virtue signaling his white guilt, right? And that drives the conversation here to the point where he's getting embarrassed by Cory Booker, okay, who is one of the wokest of the wokes, right? It's kind of crazy how that works.
And what's the mechanism? Why does the welfare state dissolve the family structure?
For one thing, it makes it unnecessary for fathers to support their offspring. And in fact, it makes it counterproductive in many cases. A very poor man who might be able to support his family realizes his family will be better off without him. But on the other hand, someone who's strictly irresponsible, either the man or the woman or both, now pays no price for being irresponsible. The taxpayers pay the price. And actually the harm done to the taxpayers, which is serious, still is not comparable to the harm done to the families, and especially the children.
To the kids.
Yeah. Who incidentally, when they want to help black people, they want to help those black people who are doing something wrong. That is, rioters, ex-convicts. They want to stop the schools from disciplining black kids, males who misbehave in school. I don't hear them concerning themselves about the blacks who are the victims of the people who are doing wrong.
Attention, code red. A bank robbery is in progress.
Oh, it is.
And the rat doesn't know how to react, and you do this, okay? And you wind up doing it again, or perhaps again. And if once in a while, a rat turns viciously on you and just becomes a total vicious killer, which is really what I was. Then don't go passing statements of morality saying, well, this was not warranted.